Hey everybody, so it's summer, the weather's getting warmer, people want to gather. People want to get together, especially after the last couple of years. And we want to somehow gather the people together that we are related to. The ones that probably know us, the ones that know all those dark little secrets and quirks about us. For some reason, that seems like fun. Let's see what happens here. What's the worst thing at your family gathering? Story 1. It was an impromptu gathering. My grandfather, Dad's dad, had reached the point in his life where he couldn't live anymore. A nice facility was found for him that he approved of. Since he couldn't take everything with him when he moved, and he knew that I was moving out of my dad's basement and into my first home, he gave me permission to go through his furniture and let him know of anything I think I would need. I wasn't allowed to take anything, just make a note of it for my grandpa to approve or disapprove. I was perfectly fine with this and promised my dad I wouldn't take anything but pictures with my phone, so he gave me his copy of Grandpa's key. My sister comes along because this is the end of an era for us, and she wants to see the house one last time. We go in and see her wrapping her father's fine china and sticking it in a box. She's defensive and wants to know why we're there. I tell her what Grandpa offered me and that my sister is there to go through old memories one last time. She begrudgingly allows us to stay, but it's clear we're not welcome. We go snoop upstairs since we had never been allowed up there, and the entire time we're going through the rooms, this woman is yelling at us that the bed set is mine and the wardrobe is mine. We assure her again that we're not here to take anything. We go through the main floor, and it's even more clear that she makes sure we are not welcome. I make a point of blatantly ignoring her worries. My sister and I go into the basement and laugh at some of the old toys there that we remember playing with as kids, and are amazed that they've held up so well, along with the ancient TV that still had dials on it. As we head back up, Dad calls me and asks if we've taken anything. I tell him of course we haven't. That wasn't the agreement. He said that that's what he figured, but wanted to be sure. Turns out his sister had alerted his other sister, the one with power of attorney, that my sister and I were stealing from our grandfather. Dad tells us to leave and that he'll sort it all out. He thinks he's got everything straightened out and goes out to dinner with his then-girlfriend, now wife. Not even an hour after he's left, one of my cousins starts a Facebook Messenger group with every single family member she can find on Facebook and proceeds to accuse me and my sister of being low class and how we'll always be low class. And that he's not even dead yet. I alert Dad, and he comes back and gets very drunk because now he knows what his family thinks of his children, and it upsets him. He demands an apology to us from both sisters and the cousin. The power of attorney sister immediately apologizes. Her daughter does not, and says she stands by what she said. The witch who started this whole thing refuses to get involved. Dad made it very clear that until they apologized, they were not welcome in his life, and canceled his plane tickets to Vegas to my cousin's wedding that he had been invited to. She tried to get him to pay her for what would have been his expenses. A couple years later, this same cousin texts me in private and apologizes. I say thank you and wish her a Merry Christmas. I never forgave her, and until she goes back to that stupid group and makes her apology as public as her insults were, I won't. Almost a decade later, I still don't talk to my dad's sister. As far as she's concerned, she's done nothing wrong. So as far as I'm concerned, I only have one aunt on my dad's side. Were they thinking that they were going to get everything, the sister? It's Why was there no communication? Did the grandfather not make it clear? Or did they just get drunk with power of attorney? It's kind of sad that these possessions were some things that were going to divide them. It didn't even sound like there was anything valuable. It just sounded like, hey, if there's something maybe you can use, something nice like that. Weird. Moving on. Story 2. The worst family gathering I was part of happened just this year. New Year's Day, in fact. My aunt has her birthday on that day, so the event was a combination of celebrating New Year's and her birthday. The entire thing took place in my uncle's bar, which is basically a large shed in the back garden. Nice little spot to hang out in. Less so when it suddenly has 16 people in it. There were quite a few people I didn't know in there, so I just stayed quiet for the most part and kept to myself by using my Switch or my tablet. Ooh, nice to have both. Context. I have high-functioning autism, and tech devices or plush toys are my go-to items to keep myself occupied and prevent stress. Being in a small space with too many people, making a fair bit of noise, and with music in the background is honestly a nightmare for me. What's worse is that my parents were not next to me. My grandma and someone else were what stood between me and them. I couldn't exactly get up and go over to them, and I was too worried that calling over to them or asking someone to get their attention would be seen as me making a fuss. I wouldn't put it past my grandma. She asked how I was doing, and when I answered honestly, she thought I was moping because everyone else wasn't doing what I wanted. She even mentioned that everyone else was enjoying themselves. This is the part of the reason why I can't stand her anymore. Trying to explain myself better met with dismissal. The odd couple of times I go to try and converse with her, her attention was easily pulled away by anyone else who wanted to talk to her or show her something. Rude. There were pretty gold-colored balloons in the room as well. I like them, but get nervous when people are rough with them. I don't do well when it comes to sudden loud noises. At one point, my uncle said they were taking up too much space on the floor and handed a small knife to one of the guests, telling him to pop them. I instantly grabbed my ears and tensed up. Sure enough, I heard one. I think my dad saw me, though, because no more happened. That was the one instance where my obvious discomfort was acknowledged, and it was only when I felt at my worst. We were there for about 2.5 hours, but it felt way longer than that. There were little snacks and things to pick at on the tables, but I was sitting in the one spot on the table where nothing was in reach. Once again, too nervous to speak up, I waited for something to be within reach. I'm not great with food, either. Despite the variety, there wasn't much I liked. I was hungry. My grandma urged me to go to the dining room inside the house where another spread had been put out. There was even less food that I liked in there. Not enough to satisfy my hunger. When I explained that to her, quietly, she got irritated and almost made it out that it was my fault. Hell, woman, you look after me for the weekends of 17 years of my life, and you act like you barely know me at all. And she's the one who wants to spend time with me again. I only got to speak to my parents again as we were about to leave. My dad asked me quietly if I was all right, and I shook my head, but gave a quiet but brief explanation of some of the stuff that happened, going into better detail once we got in the car. Both my parents apologized after realizing what a miserable time I had. They were actually shocked when I told them some of the things my grandmother said to me. It was all hugs all around and a decent meal once we got home. How old was this person? Does it say? It sounds like she was young. Hopefully not that young. But however young she is, she's still struggling with something that apparently no one else in the family understands. Did anyone try to take the time to do this? Or is it only the parents that are suffering, no, not suffering, but dealing with raising someone with autism like this? It seems like they're the only ones that understand. Was this something that she kind of had to make an appearance at? Well, I'm glad there's nothing that really bad happened, just a lot of discomfort. Story 3. A couple of years ago, my aunt got an apartment in my town, and most of the family agreed that she would host Thanksgiving. It was a pretty fun time, and mostly everyone brought something to share with everyone else. One of my cousins, who was 20 or 21 while I was 19, and I was hanging out with a younger cousin from a different aunt that I consider a good little sister when she was 7 or 8 at the time. Well, my younger cousin was having a good time, but soon after everyone was just hanging out, she said she really needed to go to the bathroom. So she goes to the only bathroom in the apartment, and she finds out that my older cousin was in there, but she was in there for like about 20 minutes. So younger cousin bangs on the door so she would get out. Older cousin told her to go away because she was in there, and when I got involved, she told me the same thing, and I heard her say that I just go play because I wasn't an adult. Well, others overheard her saying most of that, but missed when she said I was still a kid. My younger cousin was still banging on the door, and her older brother and her mom is yelling at my older cousin to get out of the bathroom. At that point, she was locked in the bathroom for about 45 minutes. And when she finally gets out of the bathroom, reeked. And we found out that she was on her phone most of that time from her own sisters because she was playing games with them on her own. So my younger cousin rushes in and throws up, missing the toilet, and gets her brother to go in and help her as much as he can, and gets her to go to her room. He cleans up after her, and their mom, the one who hosted and has the apartment, was just yelling at my older cousin for hogging the toilet and forced her out. Too long didn't read. My older cousin gets in trouble for hogging the toilet at a Thanksgiving dinner, and little cousin throws up on the floor because of it. This just sounds like one person just ruining it for everyone else. Just didn't want to be there. I mean, sounds like the whole thing would have been a lot better if she was just left behind, if she didn't want to be a part of it. I realize that we all have to come together as families, especially, valuing being together after years of being forced apart. Some people just don't want to be social, it seems like. Jeez. Let's keep going. Story 4. My uncle caused a scene at my birthday. For context, my parents drowned in a boating accident when I was young, and I ended up in the care of an older cousin. I call him my uncle, but he raised me like a son since I moved in with him. He never married or sought to start a family of his own, but he was always a great guardian to me, and he was wealthy enough that money was never an issue, as is so often the case in a single-parent household. We also happened to share a birthday. We always threw combined birthdays, which were a lot of fun, but it just so happened the year I turned what is considered the age of majority in my country also happens to be a big milestone birthday for my uncle. I'm not too worried, as there's a nearby park where we reserved the picnic area, and our combined birthdays were accepted and rather celebrated by most of the community. So I'm looking forward to a party of special magnificence. Then my uncle gets up to give his traditional speech, acknowledging both my birthday and his own. But I could feel the vibe change when he said a sentence that was so confusing that the applause punctuating his toasts died down, and everyone is trying to work out if he's just insulted them. I don't know half of you half as well as I should like, but I like less than half of you half as well as you deserve. He then announces that he's leaving and that he bids us all a very fond farewell and then, poof, vanishes. Not like he walks out or something, like he literally disappeared into thin air. Everyone is confused and is presuming him perished. I don't see him again for almost 20 years. That was a big scene, I got to admit. I don't know, man. I don't think you could even make a good movie out of something like that. I don't know. Maybe a good intro for something. Kind of weird, though. How could he just disappear? I mean, was he a magician? Who knows? Well, let's keep going. Story 5. I don't remember this, so my mom's side of the family's pretty dramatic. So's my dad's, but I'll get to them later. For one thing, my grandma and grandpa ended up having a son, my only blood-related uncle, while they were in high school, and gave him up for adoption. He came into our lives 27 years later, while I was 12, with a wife, 2 grown sons, and another 10-year-old son. But they're amazing, some of my favorite relatives. No, the real drama on my mom's side comes from her youngest sister, my aunt. I love her, but she's a mess. While she was dating my uncle, she ended up smashing another guy while he was on military service, having his child, then playing it off like my uncle had gotten her pregnant. She'd cheated on him about a week after he left, so she was able to do so successfully. She didn't tell him until they'd been married for a decade, having 3 sons with my uncle in that time span. Then, when I was about 9, she started hooking up with one of her coworkers and completely ditched my uncle for that guy, tearing their family apart. Her new boyfriend, current fiancé, is a jerkwad to my oldest cousin, the one who was made when my uncle was on military service, and drove them to the point of having underage spicy time with someone twice their age. They were 14. Then, my aunt and her fiancé refused to come to my brother's wedding just 'cause my uncle would be there. It broke my grandma's heart to have all of her family except her youngest daughter at the first wedding of the generation. Yeah, my dad's side of the family is even worse. I don't know if I'll edit that in later. Story 6. Thanksgiving with my grandmother and her husband Gary, who is not a blood relative of mine. I've always been an introvert, so after dinner, I decide to just walk around the house for a few minutes to unwind and run into Gary in the master bedroom. He doesn't say anything at the time, but about a half an hour later, after I've gone back to the living room to resume talking to everyone, Gary bursts into the room and accuses me of snooping around in their stuff. Honestly, I tell them I wasn't doing anything, just taking a walk around the house, and my grandmother believes me. My dad is so upset that Gary basically attacked me for being in the wrong place at the wrong time that the two of us leave early without spending a couple of nights there like we planned. Turns out, Gary has always had far-right political beliefs, while my dad is much more liberal, and the two of them have never really gotten along. So Gary mostly wanted to hurt me to hurt my dad rather than because he honestly thought I was digging through his belongings. He never apologized to me or my dad, and to this day my grandmother is still estranged from him over this incident, as are the rest of my family. That's sad that they had to use the kid as some sort of bargaining chip in a political disagreement. It's really sad when political views mix with family politics. And just because of that one incident, the grandmother is estranged? She's got to be hurting. She's suffering a lot just because someone decided to be accusatory. And this guy knew he wasn't snooping around. On the other hand, it's kind of great that you can unwind by walking around a house. I mean, how big is this house? It must be kind of a mansion to be able to take a walk. Story 7. We had a family gathering with my mom's side of a family, and there was this relative among us. I don't even really know who she is to me, and if she is my blood relative or a relative in SMB's marriage. Was and is a complete stranger to me, but my mom knows her, who just decided that it would be a good idea to talk in all the details how much she hates our country, how happy she is that she moved, and how wrong we are being patriotic. We all went through stuff related to political situations. Not actually political, but I don't want to bring unwanted questions by specifying details. And she perfectly knew it. To make this worse, one of the people who had to listen to it was terminally ill. I knew he was sick, but didn't know any details. Again, almost strangers. My mom's comment when we eventually went the heck out of there, "It wasn't that bad. I was expecting it to go worse." As she explained, as this lady chose a really painful topic, we could confront her pretty hard, and she was scared to mess with us after that. If she would decide to teach us how we should live our private life, there would be no way to stop her. Story 8. Got drunk with my family at a reunion celebrating some pretty big accomplishments that happened for a lot of people. Opening businesses, graduating college, getting back from the Middle East, marriages, and all that rot. Just good vibes everywhere. So everyone thought to have a good time and do a little drinking. Every adult on me and my father's side of the family got so drunk, we didn't realize we built up a full-on makeshift boxing ring and ended up fist-fighting in a massive free-for-all hell-in-the-cell-like boxing match. I woke up naked in the middle of the ring with only a pair of socks and squishy styrofoam world championship belt around my waist. I later found out that I not only beat everyone that came against me in the ring, I enacted the final kissing scene of Rocky I with my older sister, because at the insistence of everyone participating, they got me so drunk I really thought I was Rocky Balboa. Overall, even those marrying into our family had a good time and found the boxing matches really engaging, and pulling the prank on me really cemented them into our bloodline, as they know how to both take a joke, aka marrying my cousin, and give a joke in return. You know what? I approve. Let there be boxing matches. It also kind of reminds me of that Seinfeld episode with the Festivus. Air out the grievances. Tell each other what you think. Just get these things out in the open. This sounds like it turned into a win. And it sounds like from the story it turned into like a tradition. I can't believe waking up being the champion. There you go. That's got to feel good. Story 9. The once-in-a-lifetime family reunion celebrating my great-grandfather's release from the hospital after a heart attack. Well, his sister got startled out of her mind when one of the balloons popped, and she had a heart attack. She didn't make it, which sent my great-grandfather back to the hospital with a heart attack. He also didn't make it. The news gave my grandfather a heart attack. He was put in a coma. This news gave my aunt a bout of depression, which means she took it out on her daughter, who just so happened to be secretly dating my other cousin, who was adopted. She eventually divorced her husband, who was still close with the rest of the family. My cousins eventually broke up after she found out my adopted cousin and her dad were going at it. I didn't even think they had it in them to be into guys, and that caused the rest of the family to go their separate ways. 4 years later, my cousin and uncle got married. In the end, it was sort of a happy ending for those two, but nobody but me speaks to them anymore, which is kind of sad. Were you expecting any of these stories of family gatherings to have a body count? Because I didn't. It just got everyone messed up. It broke up the family, literally. And got two family members together that were a little closer than maybe they shouldn't be. It's just all sorts of messed up. And I know, you want to guess where in the world this is. I know we all have our prejudices, but I want to know where this is. I would be just as surprised if this was in the Appalachian Mountains as if this were in California. Story 10. Family gatherings are kind of rare from my point of view, but I remember one time I was just really uncomfortable for a while. I think it was a Christmas party or something, and me being the antisocial being I am, just sat off to the side until I noticed an old guy I'd never seen before staring at me really hard. Like, really hard. So after a while, I go over to my granny, my legal guardian, and only real connection to that side of the family I have, and stick by her side until she notices me and I point the guy out. But don't worry, turns out he was my great-granddad's brother or something along those lines and was staring because he didn't know me and was trying to figure out whose kid I was. The quick hello I gave him after we figured that out was the only conversation I had with the guy before he passed away. Story 11. Recently, my grandma of 98 years passed away, meaning I had to interact with a family I don't know and some I downright hate. One of those being my aunt. The few times we've interacted, she's been nothing but mean and bitter on a bad day and passive-aggressive on a good day. Well, we were all going around passing out Grandma's stuff, and I said I wanted these little signs for my stepmother. Well, Auntie said, "No, we want to keep this stuff in the family." And I shot back, "She's more my family than you ever were. People aren't used to hearing me talk, much less seeing me get angry." And when I said that, everyone there went dead silent. And my aunt knew full well what I was getting at, but she couldn't say anything without making herself look bad. Couple times she tried to talk to me, but I wouldn't entertain her. Story 12. My aunt blaming me for my grandpa's perishing in front of his unalive body, calling me lazy for not waking up earlier, and found my grandpa passed out in the bathroom. I passed out last night after finishing my part of a group project. It was an exhausting week for me. Basically, I'm a good-for-nothing granddaughter, according to her. My mom asked some relative to help me taking care of my grandpa because she had to go out of town to pick up my brother. It was my aunt's turn to help around. She wasn't, and she leaves early after my mom specifically told her to stay for a day. Whose fault is it then? Me, of course. The audacity of her to ask for her part of inheritance just 30 minutes after my grandpa's funeral. Story 13. For anyone who wonders about the cause of the decay of the status of the family unit in society, things like this should make it clear that it's the fault of families. It starts in the home. Abuse, abandonment, neglect, betrayal, parenting failures, infidelity, and other maltreatments are normal occurrences in the overwhelming majority of families. The resulting toxicity causes people to either repeat the cycle of familial abuse or to choose to not have families of their own. Until families begin treating their members better, nothing will improve. Story 14. We don't do family reunions, but there was a time when my uncle lived down the street from my parents while I was in high school. I came home from school one day, walked up to my house, opened the door, and my uncle ran out of the house carrying a pie. Soon after, my dad ran out saying, "That's my pie!" I was shocked for a second, then walked in, put my stuff down, and just started chatting with my mom like nothing happened. Story 15. As a retired respiratory therapist, I noticed when my wife and I used to live in Iowa that it was very common for long-lost relatives from California who hadn't seen mom and dad for 20 years to swoop in and demand the best care for them, and then cry inconsolably when they perished because they were old. A lot of this behavior is explained by guilt, but no amount of grief can make up for years of neglect. Story 16. As someone named Max, who lost an amazing uncle when I was young, I never got the chance to know him, really, but apparently he loved kids, me included. I'm sorry for your loss. Mine succumbed to the substance epidemic. Not the AIDS one, but I can feel your pain a smidge, though yours is worse than mine. I hope you can grieve freely, and that he didn't suffer too much in the end.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.